somewhere off the coast of Singapore, buried under the constant churn of the Andaman Sea, lies a structure that should not be able to hold the world hostage. It is not a fortress, or a nuclear silo, or a hidden laboratory. It is simply a ribbon of water. At its narrowest point, the Phillips Channel, this strip of ocean is just 1.7 miles wide. That is barely the length of a professional airport runway. And yet, if this 1.7-mile gap were to close today, the global economy wouldn't just stumble, it would begin to dissolve. In less than 72 hours, the lights in Tokyo would start to flicker. In a week, the manufacturing hubs of Shenzhen would grind to a halt. In a month, the very concept of global trade would become a historical curiosity. This is the Strait of Malacca. It is the world's most critical geographic accident. And right now, it is the center of a silent, high-stakes war for the future of civilization. To understand the power of this water, you have to understand the scale of our dependency. Think of the global economy as a living organism. If the internet is its nervous system, then the Strait of Malacca is its jugular vein. Every single year, nearly 100,000 vessels pass through these waters. That is one ship every 5 minutes, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. They carry 40% of the world's trade. They carry the circuit boards for your phone, the grain for your bread, and, most importantly, the fuel for the fire. Over 15 million barrels of oil pass through this choke point every single day. Here is where it gets uncomfortable, because our world is built on just-in-time logistics. We no longer keep reserves. We live on the flow. And in the Strait of Malacca, that flow is condensed into a space so tight that a single sunken tanker or a coordinated blockade could freeze the world's energy supply overnight. But there is one player in this game who is more terrified than anyone else. For the leaders in Beijing, the Strait of Malacca isn't just a shipping lane, it is a noose. China is the world's largest importer of oil, and 80% of that oil has to pass through this narrow needle eye. The problem? China doesn't control it. The United States Navy and its regional allies do. This is what former Chinese President Hu Jintao famously called the Malacca Dilemma. Now, here is where the story shifts. Beijing has spent the last 2 decades and hundreds of billions of dollars trying to build a way out. They've carved railways through the mountains of Pakistan. They've laid pipelines across the jungles of Myanmar. They've even floated the idea of the Kra Canal, a $30 billion project to cut a hole straight through Thailand, bypassing Malacca entirely. But geography is a stubborn opponent. Despite all the concrete and all the gold, the dilemma remains. As long as the strait is open, China thrives. If it closes, the dragon starves. But the threat isn't just geopolitical, it's physical. The Strait of Malacca is a navigational nightmare. It is shallow, in some places barely 25 meters deep. For a very large crude carrier, there is often only a few meters of water between the hull and the seabed. And then, there are the ghosts. Modern piracy in the strait isn't like the movies. There are no wooden legs or eye patches. These are coordinated high-speed strikes on the waiting rooms of global trade. Ships anchored near the Singapore Strait are sitting ducks for syndicates. that can disappear into the thousands of tiny islands of the Indonesian archipelago before the first radio call is even sent. Why does this matter? Because in a choke point this tight, chaos is infectious. A single maritime accident, caused by a pirate raid or a navigational error, doesn't just block a lane. It creates a backlog that stretches to the horizon. We like to imagine our world is borderless. We talk about the cloud and the digital economy as if the physical world has been conquered. But civilization is still tethered to the earth. It is tethered to narrow ribbons of water and the iron laws of geography. If the Strait of Malacca were to go dark, the cloud would lose its power. The factories would lose their breath. The digital world would realize very quickly that it still runs on physical atoms moving through a 1.7-mile gap in the Andaman Sea. The ships keep moving. The flow continues. And for most of the world, the Strait of Malacca remains a name on a map, a distant piece of geography that has nothing to do with their daily lives, and yet, history is built on these narrow spaces. From the gates of Babylon to the Strait of Malacca, power has always belonged to those who control the choke points. You were watching Headline Circus while everyone else was watching the surface. This is where history hides its secrets, and we dig them back up. If this story pulled you in, share it and subscribe. Goodbye.